Okay, well, we'll get started. Good afternoon and happy Thursday, OFMA members. I'm Travis Worthington, your Vice President. Today we're here for Lunch and Learn with Oregon State Fire Marshal's Office, Dr. Andre Schmidt and Sydney Smith. They're going to be covering OrCRAFT, a great new program that OSFM has put out this last year. I had the pleasure of reviewing that when they were getting all the bugs kind of worked out and everything, and I think it's going to be a really amazing tool for us to use at our departments. So I will let Sydney and Dr. Schmidt introduce themselves directly. If you have questions, please put those in the chat. We'll have a brief question and answer period at the end of the presentation, and we can ask them some questions. But otherwise, we'll go ahead and turn it over to the doc and Sydney.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the warm welcome and for having us here today. We are definitely excited to talk about OrCRAFT whenever we can. As it was just mentioned, OrCRAFT, at least the very first version, was released nearly a year ago and continues to be an exciting project for us and one we continue to try to enhance and improve. So to get things started, my name is Sydney Smith. I am the director at the Center for Fire Analytics, Intelligence, and Research here at the Oregon State Fire Marshal. I'm joined by Dr. Andre Schmidt, principal research scientist here at the center, and also the mind and developer behind OrCRAFT. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide and just very briefly go over what we'll be talking about for the next hour. So I will describe a bit of the work at the center before passing things over to Andres to dig more into the creation of OrCRAFT and some central questions used to form the tool, as well as a great demonstration so you can see it live. And then I'll take back over and we'll go through some real world applications of the tool that we've seen since it's launched. And then we'll go through, lastly, some access instructions so you would know how to find it yourself, and then additional resources if you have questions while you're trying to use it. Okay, so to give you a little background about our team, we go ahead and go to the next slide. Thank you. The purpose of our agency, of course, is to protect people, property, and the environment from fire and hazardous materials. And so the Center for Fire Analytics, Intelligence, and Research, like all other divisions in the agency, work to achieve that mission. But our niche is really in our name. We aim to provide accurate and actionable analytics, intelligence, and research to support that work. And there's a couple ways that we seek to do that. So a few of them that you might be familiar with include the data dashboards that are on our website, where you can explore incident reporting data, fire casualty data, smoke alarm installation program information, and the like. And we're also the host for the state INFRS and NARIS incident reporting data repository. So you might be familiar with my name from our NARIS updates that go out. So we also provide incident reporting guidance and that way. And then relevant to OrCRAFT, we also focus on strategic projects that allow us the opportunity to try to achieve this mission and our work in new and exciting ways. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass it over to you, Andres. Oh, Andres, I'm sorry. I think your mic isn't working. It was just a couple minutes ago. Not quite yet. Apologies, everyone. We're troubleshooting live. You might have to select your mic. If you go to your audio settings, you might have to select your computer microphone. think he's going to leave and rejoin and see if that helps.
Well, once. I just got that from the club. Yeah.
All right, luckily we're in the same room. I'm gonna, maybe Andres, if you want to come over here and we can swap. All right, apologies everyone.
Well, we have to.
Okay, we're together in the same room. We're gonna hope he's gonna share his screen again and hopefully the mic will be able to pick him up. If not, we'll make some more tweaks.
Okay. Oh yeah. Just if you disconnected 1 second. Okay.
All right, now please let us know. We're in the same room, so hopefully the single microphone is going to pick it up, but please put it in the chat if there's any issues with sound.
Yeah, can you hear me all right? I hope. Sorry,
Go on.
It worked like a minute ago. Sorry about that. Yeah, so the OrCRAFT tool again was developed according to NFPA 1300 rules. So we made sure that in all versions of it, we have the things that need to be considered according to a CR risk assessment based on NFPA 1300. And the primary goals of this tool, which is a web tool accessible to you, is obviously to reduce fire incidents, protect life and property, and enable proactive planning and prevention. So all in all, contribute to community resiliency towards fires and wildfires alike. So we used for some of the layers, we used over 43,000 building fires from the inverse database. Right now we have a little over 30 variables. I think it's at 34 now that can be used to assess the risk in a certain area. And the data come from, again, inverse and, well, in the future, NERIS, US Census and ACS data, CDC, HIFLD, and then SVI, so social vulnerability data that is either from the CDC or we have an older version from OSU that it was particularly made for Oregon and others. And of course, sorry, I forgot, Dogami is also an important data contributor for us for the footprints and building densities and other things. So OrCRAFT is based on 3 questions, so to speak, or 3 things. First thing is, what is the general likelihood of a fire occurring in your community? This includes regular structure fires and structure fires that were started by wildfire. To make this clear right from the beginning, this is not a replacement or anything like the hazard map that was withdrawn recently for wildfires. It just uses some of the outputs of wildfire models in this risk assessment, but it's again is nothing like that, and certainly not meant to replace that. You will understand at the end of this presentation why it is actually a very different thing. So the general likelihood, how do we assess that? Again, over 43,000 building fires over the last 10 years were assessed, confirmed recorded building fires, to build something like a density map, a density or it's actually a density map that calculates the number of fires divided by the number of total buildings in a certain area. So you get like likelihood of a building fire occurring, and a spatial representation of that is what you see on the left side. Obviously, you can see where the urban centers are: Portland, Salem, Eugene, Bend, and other towns and cities across the state, because building fires only happen where there are buildings. The next one is, and that is something that comes out of models. That is a wildfire burn probability. So basically the probability of that the area burns in a wildfire. So there is only dead or alive vegetation fuel that contributes to that. And that is not a hazard or anything that is represented here. That is really just the burn probability that can be selected in our tool from different products. One of them being the latest map from QWRA, or also the one that was withdrawn. The hazard map was withdrawn. The model behind it is still valid, I suppose, as much as any wildfire model that can be chosen, and a few others. So we combined that because now you're getting a map like this, where you can see the fire risk, where there's no wildfire usually in the Portland area so much. But you can see here representation of a likelihood of fire, but that is a regular building fire. So we want to have basically a combination of both. We want to assess what is the risk of a fire occurring. Of course, we only care about built-up areas as OFMA, more or less. But obviously, as we know from recent years, there's also that wildfire spread into populated areas where, burned structures. So we wanted to include that all in that general risk assessment or spatial distribution of where the risk for a fire occurring is the highest. The second question, what vulnerable assets are in your community? How susceptible are they, and how valuable are they to your community? So we took a lot of data, and I named a few of the resources earlier, and this plotted here in the Portland urban area neighborhood to show a few things. There is things like power substations, schools, so vulnerable populations, prisons, hazmat storage facilities that can be either sometimes a source of fire, but also if a fire occurs, and things get out from hazardous material, that is also something to be concerned about. So that is an asset that is considered, and many others. I give a list later, but yeah, all those things are included as spatial layers across Oregon, so you can assess or use that data for the risk assessment later. Second one the third one is, who is the most vulnerable in your community, and where does this population live? So here's a little overview that includes, again, the fire-related things like total number of buildings that go in and that we have layers for. The structure like building density, age of buildings, all of that is in a 30 by 30 meter resolution across the state. So that's about the size of a property in town. So we capture everything in decent detail here with our results. Then, of course, there are some socioeconomic things like percent of population living in poverty, per capita income, percent of the population unemployed, single parent, limited English, and things like that. Those are all indicators for the vulnerability of a population. How do they know about the fire risks? How well are they informed, or also how good or bad can they recover from a wildfire? So that includes again things like that. A lot of education background, socioeconomic background. And then, of course, a few things like population, senior population, so population 65 years or older, households with minors, number of households with disabilities. As you know, in case of a fire, there might be less able to react to it or escape the fire. So things like that are all considered. Right now we have two versions of the OrCRAFT tool online and available to you and the fire service. That is a standard version. The standard version is a little simpler with the intent that it's not confusing because there's a lot of factors and buttons to push here and things that also influence each other. So we want to make it clear this is a tool where, according to the NSFA 1300, the layers are included that need to be included, and maybe a few extra, but that's about it. It's right now 16 variables that you can see here that are in this standard version included. The analyzer version goes a little bit beyond that. That has over 30 layers right now. That includes, again, as you can see, nursing home, distance to the next fire station, per capita income you can choose, and other things. So a lot more layers that you can choose from or implement into your risk analysis, because only what you consider in your risk analysis will be reflected. The risk for that population or that entity or infrastructure will be included in your risk only once you choose. And here's a lot more to choose from. In the newer version that we so we develop those versions continuously, and the newest version that we have for both is version 1.2. So we just updated a few things. We added homeless shelters and the driving time to the nearest fire station, as well as the driving time to the nearest hospital. So not just the distance, but also, well, how long does it take the fire service in case of a house fire just to get there? So those are included. So we updated about 8 layers recently. That also includes new CDC data or ACS data as it becomes available. So we always try to keep it up to date as far as the representation of the population goes in Oregon. And we rely on that to public authoritative data, because we don't want to come up with our own ideas that might not reflect it as well, but we rely on CDC and ACS data for those socioeconomic factors, but keep it up to date as far as possible. One update we just did with version 1.2 is, for instance, the driving distance to the nearest fire station. You see the old on the left, that was from version 1.1 and before. That is a course that is just divided into 8 classes, anything from 1 to 2 miles, from 2 to 4 miles, up to over 60 miles, and that's it. Whereas the new version, for instance, it's much finer, much finer resolution. We took the entire road network from OpenStreetMap in Oregon and calculated driving time and driving distance from each location to each fire station or hospital for the other layer. So that is much more detailed now and represents that risk or this risk factor much more precisely than before. And just to show that we are constantly working and developing this tool, this is just an outlook of the next version, which will include an AI assistant. So everything needs AI today. So does OrCRAFT and OSFM. So we included that. Basically, it will help you with the interpretation that you of the results that you got from your analysis through OrCRAFT. That usually creates a PDF file and a risk map and other summary reports. I show that later. And this AI tool will help you to interpret that and maybe come up with first best steps to reduce the risk after all. It also answers questions about wildfire, structure fire, and CRR, so general questions. But questions unrelated to fire to avoid misuse will just be politely rejected. So it's really only an AI tool useful for the fire service. I think there's a few slides missing. Is that possible? Okay, yeah. I will show a few versions right now. The ones that are currently out there. I'm starting with the analyzer version here. That is the one that is a little bit more complex, so I have more to show you. That's why we're going to start an analysis with that. It has a more or less self-explanatory interface here. However, there is a manual on our webpage. So if you get a login to start this web app on the internet, and all you need is really a web browser and an internet connection. That is all. So no software licenses or anything like that is required to run the tool. So once you get to that page, there's a manual and a background document, like a white paper available that tells you how things work and what can be done and how it can be done. So you see the map of Oregon, and here delineated are the fire districts. You have regular tools like you can zoom in on any level. It will load a map from the internet, and the further you are in, the higher the resolution gets and the more detail you see. The purpose of that is you can delineate your area of interest. It doesn't have to be a fire district. You can also go ahead and delineate an area by yourself with your mouse on the screen. For instance, and as you can see, it zooms in, and that will now, the risk analysis will now be done for that particular area. You can save that as a shape file if you want, so you can reuse the same or run this similar analysis, maybe with different factors for the same region and compare them if you want to. Right now, I'm just going to choose. Another thing. Let me zoom out here. Another thing you can do is you can, of course, for orientation, show cities and plot the counties if you want to. Show where the fire stations in the state are located. You can add all sorts of layers, and you can also later, if you choose to do so, instead of delineating an area or choosing a fire district or a fire department's area, you can also select entire counties and say run this analysis for Klamath County, for instance, or whatever you choose to do. So there's basically the interface here in the map with zoom things, and you can move things around as well. So right now for this analysis, I'm just going to choose, let's say, the Salem Fire District. You can type that in here. Salem FD, here we go. So it will zoom in on the map and show you where it is and update this cutout maps and shows you here a few basic facts about that district: the size, the FDID number, the population, people per square mile, building density, and a few socioeconomic characteristics like minority population in percent, households with disabilities in percent, under poverty level, and those things. So you get a little bit of an idea what your district looks like and what populations live there. That's just an overview. So If you start an analysis, again, you choose your district or your area that you want to run the analysis for. And then you choose if you want to include the vegetation burn probability or the wildfire risk, you can choose to do so and add that, and then choose from different products here. Again, the one that is standard right now is the QWRA 2023. From this product, it takes a burn probability to, spatially assign the risk of a wildfire occurring after all. Then the ones that we are more concerned about, the actual building fires, we have different things that you can choose from here. We recommend this standard setting, which is a ratio of the density between number of building fires and the amount of buildings that are there. That is to account a little bit for the fact that, well, there's more important, obviously, because there's so many more buildings than, in a small town out or in the southeast, for instance, of the state. So that, makes it a little bit more comparable. So that is the standard setting. The next thing is the risk layers. So what do I want to look at for my risk analysis? So I want to include the age of buildings, building density, why not? And SVI is always a good one, of course. Hazmat facilities, distance to the nearest hospital and fire station. You can basically add as many as you want. Mobile home parks as a risk unit. If you add that, they appear here in that list. Those factors will be included. I only choose a few now to make it not, the analysis not take too long. If you decide to not do that, you can, of course, click and say remove it. So it's gone if you picked some by accident. But I'll add it back here. And then there's something like, so you need to choose a few layers that are needed. The next is supplementary layers. So why supplementary? So that is things like home values, for instance. The reason is home values are usually a little bit are not correlated to vulnerability of the population, because usually the higher the home value, the more prosper the population is, or wealthy, probably being educated, having insurance, property insurance, a pretty good one, and so forth. So that can be, however, be included, but it doesn't really reflect, unlike those layers here, the vulnerability of the population, but kind of say the opposite. However, they might want to be considered in specific calculations, or if you just want to know how that relates to the overall risk. The next thing is you can set weight factors. Let's say you go to your district, you want to run an analysis and say, well, I have a lot of mobile home parks, and I'm rather concerned about those guys and the people who live there in that area. So I give that a higher weight in my calculation. Let's say 3. And say, now it will look at it, but the mobile home park areas will be will be weighted a little bit higher than the other risk in the calculation, because that's what I want to look at right now, and I know they are very vulnerable in my district, for instance, or in my area of interest. So once you've done that, you go to the risk assessment. And yeah, I didn't show that. You can choose different maps here, for instance, for the output, and also for your selection of the district here. And if you want to zoom in, you can switch between satellite imagery here, and then you can zoom in and explore things, or you can choose between the street map, if that is a concern of yours, or if you just want to use that for orientation. The standard settings here, the topographic maps, that gives you a little bit of everything. Well, topography, obviously, as the name says, and where the roads and cities are. So that is the standard. So you can switch between that. You can say in the results, show me the number of buildings in my risk classes. So how many number of buildings are in the lowest risk area in my district, in the medium risk or highest risk. The same you can do for the raw distributions or for the population within those risk areas. So how many people in my area of interest are in live in that very high risk area, for instance. The next thing is you can create a summary report. I will do that because I want to show you what it does. And once you did that, you just started the calculation, and it shows you here a little bit what is going on. It will update this later. Right now, it's cutting out the raster files for all the layers that you choose to be included in your assessment. It will cut those out. Let me show that here. Cut those out for your area of interest. So you have that layer, and it goes into the overall risk that is classified. So it takes a building fire likelihood for that area. It takes a wildfire burn probability. It takes the risk value. Those are the values represented in all the layers that you have, and the weight factors for each of those layers that we chose before. So that is what it's doing in the background. Let's switch back to the tool. It takes a little bit. So yeah, it cuts out all the rasters for those the variables that you just chose. So it takes a little bit because that tool, unlike any risk map or hazard map, it's not a fixed result. You zoom into a certain area, it calculates the risk relative for that area. It uses only the variables that you chose. So it can't be a prepared, ready-to-go map, but it will be calculated each time you run it. So that's what it does here, and that's why it takes a little bit, because it's calculated in 30 by 30 meter resolution on the fly. So each time you run an analysis, there's no fixed result yet. So yeah, that makes it it takes a little bit in the background, but you're just on the browser. It won't affect your computer. It's running in the back on a web app server. But also it makes it much more flexible, as you can delineate whatever area you want, and it will do it for your area of interest and nothing else, using the risk factors that you decided to choose. Unless you choose the standard version, which will also allow you to select any area you want on the map if you delineate that, or you can load a shape file, or again, just choose a fire district or a department here. But you cannot change the layers. Those are the 16 layers I showed earlier for the standard version. So we will now compile the report, as you can see here. I will open it later and show you what that entails for your risk area. And you can see the risk distribution already here for the Salem Fire District, considering the risk variables that we choose, like social vulnerability we chose, and building density, distance to nearest fire station, hazmat facilities. Those are the things that are included now in this risk map for the overall risk. So then you get on your web app server, you get things, when the results are ready, where you want to save it. So I just save it here. It's a zip file that contains a few things that I will show you now. So that is the latest result here. Okay, here we go. So it contains a report PDF. So it creates a report that includes a risk map that you just did. It's a PDF file, so everybody can download it and see it. An overall risk map. It will show you what we chose. We said we want the number of buildings in each risk class in my district. So 31,484 buildings are in the highest risk area in Salem, for instance. The next thing is it will show you what variables were included in your risk analysis. So when you chose, and you can see the mobile home parks were rated higher in that risk. So that is just to make the results reproducible and clear, so everybody knows what was done to come up with this, or what was considered to come up with this risk map. And the next thing is some overview of your area. How many buildings were in the area that I delineated, or the district that I chose? What was population in those areas? How many mobile home parks are in that area? People over 65. What's the average SVI in my area? Aggregated over all the pixels, 30 by 30 meter pixels in your district. Structure fire likelihood is relatively high. The wildfire burn probability is very low, which is not a huge surprise given that it's the urban area of Salem. So that summary will be available to you as a PDF. Other things are a GeoTIFF map of the result that will basically allow you to load it into let's say into an ArcGIS for if you want to make a nicer report, or use it for other further analysis, so that can be loaded into a GIS right away. And for fire departments who do not have, let's say, like a license for ArcGIS or another GIS system, it also will produce the map in a format that everybody can have and use for free. That is a Google Earth map, so to speak. So you can just click on it. It will, or you load it, start Google Earth on your web browser, and you load it. I will just set the properties a little more to transparent, like so. And then you can basically zoom in to your area of interest with the map being overlaid, and you can go down to the neighborhood level and see, oh, where's my risk the highest in my district, and where is it rather low. And you can, really zoom into the neighborhood level without any cost, or without having installed any geographic or GIS system on your computer or your department. You don't even need that, as it creates these layers as well. Yeah, so that is what the tool produces. Again, there are a few tools here, and what it does is explained all in the manual that is on that web page, where you can access that tool as well. I just want to show real quick for comparison. So this is what the app, the standard app, looks like. So the one I showed was the analyzer. This is a standard. It's a little simpler. And this actually right now on this web page that you would get access to, where you can start either of the versions, and you can see the guide here, the standard user guide, and the technical manual, and of course contact information. So this is a standard version. It does essentially a very similar thing. So also here you can, zoom into areas and select whatever area you would like. You can save the shapefile. You can load a shapefile to delineate your area of interest that you want to run the analysis for. So all those things are the same, and you can include wildfire risk, or not. Whether you want to add this or not. I guess in an urban area, it doesn't make as much sense, but if you do the analysis for a WUI area, of course, that is something you should consider. And then there's a risk assessment. So you see there's no number of layers, 34 numbers. You cannot choose, and you can also not weigh them for the analysis. You can only it will always include those 16 variables, and they are all equally weight. So all with one. Every asset that is considered here goes in with the same weight to calculate the overall risk. So that would be really, all of that, which again allows less things, but also is less confusing if you really want to use an analysis and don't want to go, deep into details, or have to decide what you choose. It's recommended to just run the standard version and just delineate your area and do the things you can do here, but you will not be needed to make decisions what to consider, or even weigh a certain risk factor. That can be done with the analyzer version, not with the standard version. Yeah, so that is it so far from those. I will turn over to Sydney again. If I, yep, I get it done here. We were, I think, here.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. All right. Yeah. Thank you, Andres. And I just wanted to plug in a couple of real world applications as well, because if you're anything like me, I think it helps to not only see the demo of it and all of the things it potentially could do, but to also learn more about how people are actually using it and applying it in their departments and districts. So we can go ahead and look at the first example. So this one comes from an agency that was starting their next 5-year community risk reduction plan. And so that was the focus of how they decided to use OrCRAFT. So they ran it exactly like Andres exampled, and they were able to identify those local risk classifications in their district to get a better picture of how things like fire likelihood, vulnerability of population and infrastructure, and response challenges all intersected together, so that ultimately they're able to create a plan that prioritized risk reduction within their community most effectively. Ultimately, they found that the outputs of OrCRAFT that Andres just showed could be combined with some other data, which is a theme we'll also see in some other examples as well, that ultimately supported the resource and staffing plans that they were seeking to create and develop a comprehensive strategy going forward, which was really when this tool was being created, like the initial like end state that we were hoping for. So it's exciting to see that that is also how it's being used. But the next example, which we can go to now, was one that we had maybe not necessarily anticipated from the start, but was also equally interesting and important. So one agency comes from, or this one example comes from an agency who was looking at the OrCRAFT outputs. And as they were doing that, they were looking a little bit closer at the population demographic details that it produces. And as they were reviewing it, they found something that was pretty surprising to them. And for their agency, they found they had a much higher percentage of households in which someone was living with a disability than they had ever expected before. And that made them start to question, what have our outreach strategies been thus far? Are we reaching that population as effectively as we can? And that prompted some additional consideration around how they might want to try to reach that population going forward. And they inspired them to find some local organizations who already serve that population in their community, to partner with them to begin co-presenting and collaborating so that both of those agencies are really able to better meet their goal of strengthening that community fire and life safety. So that was an example we hadn't initially anticipated would be supported by OrCRAFT, but we're really excited to see. A third example is, which we can go to the next slide now, thank you, comes from an agency that was really seeking a way to emphasize and show the importance of fire code and enforcement inspections. And we thought, what, we can use OrCRAFT to help us with this. So we sought to do that by overlaying a map of their inspectable occupancies. And I'll show an example with just some general data in a second, but overlay a map of their inspectable occupancies with that OrCRAFT risk map output that has those 5 different colored zones, which allowed us through that to see that more than 40% of their inspectable occupancies fell within a very high relative risk zone within their district, according to OrCRAFT. And this finding showed the importance of risk reduction tools, including fire code inspections, to help reduce risk in our communities, especially the areas that are most vulnerable. And our next slide it does not include the data from that specific agency, but just as an example of what the output was, so you can see this is what it looks like when we run OrCRAFT, the standard version for Marion County, and then we just applied some fire incident location data to give you an example of what that point data looks like mapped over it. And you can see what the agency was able to look at and then take back and talk to other stakeholders and partners external to their department to help show and demonstrate the value that the inspection work really has for their community. So we can go to the next slide. That is all about accessing OrCRAFT. So it's very, very simple. It's a free tool that is available to the Oregon Fire Service and emergency planners. So accessing it is pretty simple. The first step is really reaching out to our team at the email on the screen just to request login credentials. And we do have it behind some login credentials because we want to make sure it is protected for the Oregon Fire Service and emergency planners, and that it doesn't become a tool for private industry so much so that, you know, the fire service, the people who it was created for, aren't able to access it. And then we have that right on our website where Andres showed. So there's a path you could follow to get there. But then when we also provide your login credentials, we provide a link as well. So it should be super quick and easy. And then very lastly, I'll end with just some additional resources. So there's a couple different contact information provided on the slide. The first is just our general team inbox, which I think is probably in most cases the first step, because we can review your question, figure out who on the team is maybe best equipped to answer it and provide any support. But Andres and I are also more than happy to provide any support, answer any questions that you might have. As Andres demonstrated, we continue to find ways to enhance the tool and to make it even more useful and effective. So we want to hear from you if you've already used it and you found some things to be successful, or you have, like some of the examples I touched on, a use case that maybe is unique to your department or your district and you want to share. We'd love to hear that. But likewise, we also want to hear if you've used it and maybe you've run into challenges or there's things you'd like to do with it that you're not quite able to do. We want to hear that as well, because all of your lived experience and knowledge with actually implementing this work is going to be what makes OrCRAFT ultimately better for everyone in the long run. So thank you again to the board, for everyone, for having us here today. We're happy to take questions now if you have them, but also if they come to you later, please feel free to send them our way.
Okay. Thank you very much for that presentation. That was very informative. Again, a great tool to use if you're trying to do community risk assessments in your community. So is there any questions from the membership before we give you back some of the time for your day? I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Vanessa, I'm not seeing anybody with hands raised. Oh, wait a minute, hang on. Right, and then Vanessa put into the chat there, thank you all who attended today. Please complete the survey. If you complete the survey and get your certificate. We typically will send those out by Friday, April 24th. Special thanks to, again, Sydney and Dr. Schmidt for being with us today. With that, seeing no other questions, we'll give you some of your time back and be safe out there. Have a good day.
Thank you.